That's 5 words now that I read it out. But yes, you get a lot of history.
Good thing you corrected that. Otherwise, someone in the comments would be like, Ryan.
I would have been obliterated.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and I am joined once again, third-time returning champion, Ryan Skeffington, author of the Infinite Existence series. Welcome back to the show, Ryan.
Thank you. I like to complete my trilogies.
Ah, there we go. That is a good way to get into this. But for this episode of Author Adjacent, we are going to be digging into character creation. And my first question is thus, Ryan, why did you suggest character creation as the topic for today?
I think it's the most fun.
Elaborate on that.
Let's go for it. So, world building, you build the world once and it only evolves through the actions of the characters in your story. Characters have an evolution outside of the world at every different time iteration of their life. And so they don't exist just in the words of your story. They exist in the past and future outside of your written word. And I think exploring that unknown about an individual character, providing that depth, is super fun as just a creative exercise. And it's inspired other writings, as we'll get into a little bit later. It's it encompasses the world, it encompasses the plot, it encompasses the conflict, it encompasses the interpersonal relationships that all the people have within the story, because they're not just existing in a vacuum within the world that you have written. They have existed long before when the main character is meeting them. When an adventurer walks into a town and goes to the local tavern, the barkeep has a life that he knows nothing about. The ranger in the left corner has a life that he knows nothing about. But the ranger and the barkeep also have past and history and relationship that the POV doesn't have. And so that informs how they speak to each other, how they behave, how they interact with the world. And I think there is just such a breadth of experimentation with character creation.
It sounds like an argument could be made that character in general is the root of all story. Because without characters, do you have a story?
I would support that. Um, do you have a story without a writer? Does the story exist with the characters without the writer writing the story? That's a bit meta, and I think it's silly, but maybe not.
We're getting into some deep philosophy that may or may not, does and does not have an answer.
Do or do not, there is no story.
Yes. And from there, I would actually ask you, one, great answer. Two, what is your process then for developing compelling, multi-dimensional characters that feel real? Because that's really what you're getting at, is that the characters are real. So how do you create a person?
You build the world. You start with the world because a person is informed by the world that they grow up in. It is both nature and nurture from a human perspective, in my opinion. And so you have to create the world that their parents grew up in first. And you have to create the world that made their grandparents the way that they are. And so in the Infinite Existence series and world, where we came from really informs who we are. And that seems counterintuitive for me to focus on so much of the character aspect and it be the most important part. But if the world is kind and resources are prevalent and there is honesty amongst the people, that creates a totally different dynamic for people than a world that is resource scarce. It is filled with backstabbing and lying and is filled with a conqueror's or colonizer's mentality. And so I start with the world that the people grow up in and then choose the decisions that the character that I'm talking about I choose the decisions their parents made them the way that they are, so that there is grounding in reality for their behavior and there is substance and depth to the words that they say, so that you're not just making up how would this character respond to this reaction. If you built their backstory well enough, the response is almost automatic.
What you're saying is, in order to make a sandwich, you must first invent the universe.
In order to have eggs, you must have chickens.
Yes, that's true. So it sounds like you're a big proponent for like building the backstory of your characters before you even start writing, before you even start plotting.
This is something that I developed from book 1 to book 2 to the novella. Um, I haven't done it from scratch since book 1, because everything is within the same universe. But book 1 did start with the concept of what would the world look like if it fulfilled the question that I asked. And so I did start with the world. And then the characters fit within that world to the plot line that I assigned to them. And so I would say if I was going to start over again, I would start with the world, because if I'm going to create a academic institution-esque type story, what type of world is necessary for academic institutions to even exist? Um, do you have a caste-based system like I have in Lost Souls and Eternal Dreams, or has the world moved on from that? Do you have a more democratic institution where everyone gets to participate as opposed to just the elites? And then once you have the world's fundamentals and foundation, then you can build the families that each character operates within, the traditions, the cultures, the music, the food, all the things that make humans human. You build those backstories, and then you can create the plot of what are they going to be doing in this world with the established backstories that you've created.
Okay. So you start with the world,
Hmm.
then you make the characters, then you make the plot.
Yep.
How much of the world do you as the author need to be aware of before you can start moving on to the characters? Like, do you need to know 90% of it, or is it I need 20% and I'll bounce back and forth between world and characters for a while?
I think you need societal systems. You can get really far with the foundational societal systems, forms of government, types of economies. Now, you don't have to define the economies, because once you define an economy, you're beholden to it forever, and credit systems are really hard to maintain. How do you conflate inflation in solar credits? Don't do economies. But once you have, I'll use this far flung idea that I've got after this round of world 12 planets. Each planet has a different type of structure. Some have rulers that live off planet in a spaceship, so that they are completely separated. Some rulers live in hunter gatherer societies because their technology hasn't developed enough. Others live in a Sweden esque, smaller type planet that acts as the world's neutral bank for all of the 12 planets to coexist. One of the planets is as big as Jupiter, and the founding family decided to go big on their planet, but it means they're undeveloped. There is still thousands and thousands and millions of hectares of lava and undeveloped and unterraformed, unusable acreage on their planet. What does that hard world create of those people? And so, if you kind of create the fundamentals for where these people exist, then you can start creating the families and the characters. And the more that you build the base for character, sorry, more that you build the base for world, the better a base you can build for character, and then a better base you can build for plot. And it's kind of like sculpting. You can add more material and add more material and add more material, so that the more material you have, the more you have to work with. And then you can start fine tuning all of your details as you've built it out. If you are building a sculpture, you start with the legs, then you do the torso, and then you add the head. You can sculpt a brilliant head without a torso or legs, but a story will be lacking if the sculpture you're trying to make is legs, torso, head.
Ground that for me. We're
Mhm.
we're we're talking about like this very like high level stuff for building out your world in order to build out your characters. How does that transfer then in a practical sense? Like, what is step one for once you get to the character creation part for you? For
Mhm,
when you're creating your characters for Lost Souls, Eternal Dreams,
mhm,
and the novella, you've made your world. You have a good idea of what it is,
mhm.
whether or not it's caste system, what kind of society it is. What is step one for creating your character?
What is the goal of the character? What are they going to be proactive about? And now this can be something that they want so desperately that they're willing to run towards, or it can be something that they're so fearful of that they're trying to run away from. Um, Whatever the motivation is, it needs to create movement and change. And that's where I think most people say good stories come from. They involve conflict, change, and growth. And so, knowing what that character wants, knowing the end state of that character, you can put them in the beginning. And then the plot is how do they go from beginning to end in an interesting way?
Okay, I think I follow what you're talking about. So then how much backstory do you create for them? Do you have like a documentation that you like to go to, or is it just tons of pages of notes that have no organization, which I would doubt because I know
Yeah.
you're a heavy plotter.
Yes. I think that creating backstory for the characters that they're going to interact with. It doesn't have to be super deep, but just enough to inform the characters' relationships with those people and why they decide to do what they do is extremely important. And it's made my writing better, I believe. So, the novella I'm working on is the founding story of one of the Titans. And the Titan is the gladiatorial combatants in the Infinite Existence trilogy. And Holix comes from a family who is very, very, very high up in the caste system. So there's lots of expectation there. And her mother is extremely powerful in this world. So there's lots of expectation there. And her father is extremely famous. So there's lots of expectation to be famous. And she wants nothing to do with it. She wants to escape the perfectionist expectation that the world and her parents set upon her. And so, um, creating the backstory for her mother, the world, and her father, just enough to inform how they interact with her, is where I started. And then I said, all right, what journey is she going to go on to run away from that expectation, but run towards her desire for freedom and self identity, self expression, uncovering all of the positive emotions that she's kept hidden away her entire life and breaking herself of the expectation to be someone she doesn't want to be because it wouldn't hit if she wasn't running away from something. If we don't know who her mom is and why she's scary and there's no big bad evil person that she's running away from, you just know there's a person running, but you don't know what from.
And that's why you need all that context of the other characters and what they do and who they are in relation to our main character.
And some people may be able to add that in post and they just
Mhm.
write the main character and do that. For me, having a completely fleshed out architectural plan before I write prose is the only way that I can do it successfully. I get
Mhm.
lost if I don't have a plan.
Yeah. That is something I've definitely learned about myself as well as I like to plot. And as I've gone I'm pretty far into my debut right now, and I've gone through, God, I think like 5 drafts of it, which I hope I don't do that many in the future. But one of the things I learned about myself is I need a more detailed plot than what I tried to do this time. And it seems like you're very similar, where you need to know the world, you need to know the characters, you need to know the plot before you start writing. Because I feel like trying to figure out where you're going on the page as you're writing it,
Mhm,
it's just too much. There's too many options. I need limitations. What I want to be figuring out right now in this moment is how to express the thing
mhm.
that I've already decided.
It has also been revealed to me the importance of showing the reader the change and not expecting them to understand it through the passing of time. And so, one thing I did in book two was I made a calendar for every single event. And so the novella takes place over a year at over 22 scenes. And so when you know as a writer exactly how many days happen between each event, whether it's 12 hours, 2 weeks, or 6 months, you can then inform the reader how much change the character has gone through. Because if there's conflict in the morning and then there's another conflict in the evening, that's going to be the same person. But if the main character has conflict with her mom, she goes through 8 months of growth and the reader gets to see that 8 months of growth, they're going to fully expect that she is going to behave differently when confronting that conflict, her mother, when she sees her again. And if she doesn't behave differently, that's either a failure on the character's part and you feel bad because they didn't overcome the big bad, I guess, villain or antagonist of the story, or they just think you as a writer, if you didn't explain that it was a failure, didn't have the character grow or change at all, and that's not satisfactory.
No. Well, then how do you balance that? Because there is the one side where you just try to show it without really telling anything about it and just have it be kind of a background of change as they go through the events. But then you have the opposite side where it's too telling, it's too on the nose, where the narration goes, and suddenly she was a different woman because she realized in this moment. Like, how do you balance between those two different things?
This is a technical piece that I kind of picked up when learning to write is the try fail cycles. And so when you are showing growth of an individual, you can show them grow towards competence in another category of progression, but still show failure in another category of competence. Because let's say the main character is talented at fighting and she comes across someone who is equally as talented at fighting and she loses and she works and she works and she works and she fights and she beats that person. That has shown character growth in terms of one aspect of that character. But if from T0 to T end of the story, she is still scared of her mom, no matter how much confidence she's given, that is still, her growing as a human being, but still having a deep-seated conflict or curse that she has not yet overcome and is still working towards.
So then, how do you balance creating unique characters um, while not becoming cliche and trying to make it so that you have this diverse cast of people to play with your story?
Unique backstory and unique motivations. In the novella, one of the characters goes to the academy just because she thinks Hollis is an interesting person and wants to have a little bit of fun. She is so bored with the what the world has to offer because she is the child of the king, essentially. She goes to school just because she's never met Hollis, because Hollis has been protected by her parents to be this perfect student. And she heard about that and was like, huh, I'm going to go check this girl out. And what does that character's journey look like within the relationship of Hollis growing as a person? And so to avoid cliche, I think you have to give detail to the side characters and not prescribe the general archetype to your side characters.
Yeah, you got to make sure that your side characters are not flat. They don't have to be as developed as your primary characters, your main
Mhm.
characters, because they, for the sake of the story, they do exist in service to the story and the main characters.
I think all
You
side characters should be cooler than the main character.
really?
I do.
That's interesting.
They should have such a cool backstory that you only get them for 3 pages and you want to know more immediately. They have to have a much harder impact because you get less internalization, you get less time with them on the screen, and they have to have an impact uh, to be able to be remembered as strongly as the main character. And so in Lost Souls, you get a character named Perxis. He is one of the Titans, the gladiatorial combatants. He gets two scenes. He is some people's favorite character.
Wow, I did not know that.
Some
Well,
people are like, I can fix him. And just by hearing that someone says, I can fix him, the person who's never read this book before knows exactly how messed up this person is and how interesting and exotic and off kilter a little bit this character is.
yeah, but there's still something that attracts characters and readers to them.
Absolutely.
So, with that technique though, are you ever worried about being in danger of your side characters being so much more interesting than your main character that your readers prefer or wish that they were a main character? Or is that something you're trying to facilitate? Hmm, I'm not sure.
That's a wonderful question, and I haven't had enough reader experience to know what I am doing, and I haven't written enough to know if I can do it on purpose or not. But some people say they portray themselves as the main character when they're reading. And so the greater the side characters, the greater the world, the greater the motivations, the better a reader can immerse themselves in the world.
Hmm.
Or if there's someone who likes the main character but doesn't ascribe themselves to it, you get a much more interesting dynamic of following that person around. Now, obviously, you want the main character to be interesting, someone you root for, someone you want to see progress and
Hmm.
grow. But if they're not growing relative to other really cool, highly competent individuals, it's not very impressive. Um,
Hmm.
a toddler learning how to read relative to other toddlers is super impressive. A toddler learning how to read against a PhD candidate, not all that impressive. And most
Valid.
stories start with a toddler, the farm boy growing up doing absolutely nothing, but going out into this big expansive world to conquer the big bad guy. They're the chosen ones. They're gonna save the day. You have to grow relative to people that are worth growing towards.
Yeah, I like that. Damn. These are good answers. But so then here's my question. You've written your trilogy, you're still writing your trilogy. You have the third book coming out. You have multiple POVs for this one, multiple main characters to kind of spread that interest around. And it sounds like pseudo self-insert, not self-insert, but audience insert for those main characters. And then you have your novella that you've been working on,
Hmm.
which is a single main character, is that correct?
Yep, single POV.
So
It's
single POV,
yep.
is it a different process for doing the character creation over here, or we have a single POV versus over here, where we have 5, 6, 7?
It's much more detailed with a single POV. I think this is a hypothesis. Readers will grant you a certain amount of leeway in a multi POV story if you communicate that these characters are doing other things in the background. And so that's why a calendar is super important for me for my multi POV stories, because when character B is doing something, in my mind, character A is also doing something. And I tell the reader that character A went and did something. And so they kind of, uh, they give you leeway or grace and fill in the blanks in the imagery of that growth. With a single POV character, the reader is spending 100% of the time with that character. And so let's say you skip 3 months of time and you hope that they will follow the growth over a 3 month training split, but you don't show them training once at all and they go from scrawny pipsqueak to strong bodybuilder fighting champion. They're going to be like, I don't believe you because you didn't prove it to me. And so there's a lot more scrutiny, my hypothesis, in a single POV story. So every step of the way, you need to show how the progression is happening.
No, I think that makes sense. Like, when you have less people to spread your attention around, you're gonna focus the greater power of your attention on that single POV.
Hmm. In a multi POV story, every character can be Chekhov's gun. You can tell the reader that
Mm,
this person did something and this something is important and it'll come back at the end. You can't Chekhov's gun the main character because the person is sitting in the living room looking at the gun the entire time.
Valid. Valid. You have a lot less leeway with that.
Hmm.
So then you have your characters. They want something.
Hmm.
They want to work towards something. You have figured out who they are. But usually there's obstacles in their way to get there, to get to the thing that they want, and that's where we come up with like plot and everything like that. But often those things that are in their way, yes, there are external things in their way. There's this antagonist over here who is putting these obstacles here. But also just as frequent is our the characters' obstacles, the things that they are afraid of that prevent them from reaching their goal that they have to overcome and create character arcs. So then how do you decide which flaws or vulnerabilities to give your characters to make them relatable yet distinct?
I think the vulnerabilities come from the story that you want to tell. Um, what type of story will go best with the growth of certain flaws, obstacles, vulnerabilities? And so a story of self identity and self discovery needs obstacles of placed identity on the individual. If you want to talk about someone overcoming a physical impediment, the obstacles is an unkind world to that physical impediment. And so now I've only done this a limited number of times, but I think the world and the goal that the starting point of A to B in the world that you've created inspires what they have to overcome and the hills and the valleys that they have to cross to get from A to B.
And whether they are internal or external, you're usually battling a combination of the two.
Absolutely. And on the way there, they can either do it themselves or they can get help with it because we as humans are not an individual self made being. We are the culminated existence of all those that have spent time with us and everything that we've consumed. And so each character along the way can learn something from somebody else to help grow, or you can bring someone in to help remove an obstacle on their behalf so that their strengths can shine, or just because removing a barrier from somebody is a good thing to do. It shows characterization for the side character. This character is struggling with something and they really, really want to overcome it. Just giving them the answer is sometimes the kindest thing you can do because what's going to come after is even harder, but only they can solve that.
That is an important distinction, making sure that if you solve the problem for the character through a side character,
Hmm.
that's just a stepping stone for them to face the bigger, more real problem.
Hmm. You
Yeah.
can Deus Ex Machina a small problem in the middle, and readers won't care about it because that is just called mentorship. You can't Deus
Interesting.
Ex Machina the big bad evil villain because you have taken away the satisfaction of a growth story.
That is so apt that people don't really think about that. They hear Deus Ex Machina and they're like, no, it's horrible in all situations. But you're right. Like, as long as you're not doing it at the end, I think that's really what you can make use of these things because they exist for a reason.
Hmm.
All of these things are tools for writing.
Gandalf is a Deus Ex Machina for 70% of the story, and he had to be
Oh,
removed
yeah.
so Frodo could have his growth climax.
Yeah. No,
What
that's
is
true.
Gandalf here for? He's here to solve problems. How's he going to do it? Magic. Explanation. No.
That is 100% most of the Lord of the Rings trilogy right there.
But we love Gandalf because he's
We do.
competent. He's
Yes.
interesting. He solves problems. He's the main character of the story outside of door dashing the ring to the volcano.
Door dashing the ring to the volcano. I'm going to stick that one in my pocket to use later. That was a good one. So, you suggested this topic. You really like character creation. What is your favorite part then with creating a character? And follow up to that, what's your least favorite part?
Visuals is my least favorite part. I pull an image from the internet and I make that the character. Most favorite part, exerting power in the world. I love characters who are superheroes, and so it doesn't have to be Superman or Iron Man or whatnot, but someone who is the person for their thing. And so all of the Titans have a niche within their skills capability, and it's reflected in their name. The big 6'10", 400-pound guy, he is the Titan of Fortitude. He carries a shield. He doesn't carry a weapon because his job is to get in the way. And that's his specialty. And how can you use a shield as an offensive and defensive and problem solving capability tool? There's so many different ways that you give this person their thing and they can interact with the world. Say, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Every bender has a specific element, but they can all solve the same problem in a different way. Same thing with character creation. You give them a competence and a weakness, and they can solve the problems of the world in their own unique way. And that's a whole lot of fun. You're like playing Sudoku with characters.
That's something I really like about. So I'm focusing on noble dark fantasy, and the reason I like that moniker, noble dark fantasy, is because like the world is dark, things suck, there are problems and bad things out there, but there are people out there who are trying to make it better, who are trying to carry the torch of hope to improve either their own lives or the lives of other people. I love that positive mentality of the world is dark, but people are not.
That
There are
sounds
good
like
people out there.
a nonfiction story. Are you sure you're writing fiction?
I swear I am.
No, but we need
These
people
stories
like
may or
that.
may not be inspired by people or real life things.
Any recreation or renaming of a real life person is an
Yeah.
utter work of fiction and nothing but coincidence. You have been
You
copyright
heard
aged.
exactly. Okay, so your least favorite thing is the visuals, and you really like using them like jigsaw puzzles to solve tools. But then, how do you use dialogue to reveal all of that heavy backstory? That like not even heavy backstory, just you have a volume of backstory ready. How do you reveal that through dialogue and action? You've mentioned before that you really like drawing action and not as much dialogue. But how do you use both to do that?
I'll use the opening scenes structure of the novella to kind of develop tension because there is no motion in the opening scene other than a person setting down a piece of paper and scratching their plate with a fork. That's the only action in the opening scene. And my beta reader said, "Oh my God, such intense tension from the word go." So I hopefully did my job right. In this dinner, the main characters sit in a triangular seating arrangement at a circular table that is too large. And so they're really far away from each other. Everything is very sharp. They're equally distanced from each other. So there's shared power dynamics. And Hollix gets a letter, and instead of just setting it on the table, she throws it on the table. And her mother has a visible sit back reaction. And her response is, "Must you be so reactive?" To 99% of the world, dropping a piece of paper on a table is a non action. It's not important. But her mother's response is to have a visceral, disgusted response and respond with, "Must you be so reactive?" Meaning she views this as a disgraceful behavior. And so, "Must you be so reactive?" Forwards tells you everything you need to know about their dynamic, the expectation Hollix is expected to keep with her behavior, what her mother wants from her, and how she's lived her entire life in terms of controlling chaos and being the image of perfection. So
You really do get a lot out of that sentence. Like you get a lot of history of that relationship.
that's 5 words now that I read it out. But yes, you get a lot of history.
Good thing you corrected that. Otherwise, someone in the comments would be like,
I
"Ryan."
would have been obliterated. But
but no, like you really do get a lot out of that. Like that's impressive. I like that.
Another one is prose, which is something that I've really tried to think of creative ways to describe emotion, like you said earlier, squeezing the frustration, bleeding the frustration out of your hands. There is an interaction that Holix has towards the beginning of the story with another character, and the sentence is, "She scratched the veneer of a new emotion." And the word veneer implies thin, brittle, surface level, something that's easily breakable. There's no depth to it. And so when that emotion is joy, can you understand what her entire life has been like up into this point where the veneer of emotion has been touched for the first time?
We talked about this a little bit in the previous episode about how you and I both really like quotes. We really like sayings. And I think we can extend that love into we really like good lines. And
Mhm.
that's a good line. Like
Mhm.
the veneer of an emotion. Just scratch. Oh, I like that a lot. You're really churning up some interest here.
Good, good. That's the hope is I think I keep getting better at it with every iteration of doing the process, which is kind of the goal of doing things and getting better at them. But with my increase in hopefully skill, and tact and ability, my confidence is increasing. And so I have the ability to sell it a little bit better because there's nothing so horrible to me as selling something I don't believe in. It feels disingenuous. And so every time I get better at writing, my old works become more inferior to my current self. And so it becomes really hard to sell the older stuff.
No, that makes sense. Like it's again a little bit of like what we were talking about in the last episode. It's about building that trust in yourself.
That's exactly it.
Mhm. But bringing this kind of like all together with multiple things we've talked about and bringing it back to character creation, I am a little curious, especially moving from books 1 and 2. How did you incorporate reader feedback or critique into refining your characters during the revision process or even just transitioning from book 1 to
hmm
book 2?
When a reader tells me something about a character that I did not expect them to say, that means I didn't give that character enough backstory and I need to go back and do more. Let's say the Titans, there are 7 Titans. Not all of them got the same level of depth and backstory during the first draft of Eternal Dreams. And when beta readers were reading it, they were like, "Oh, he's totally doing this because of this reason." I'm like, "That's wrong. I do not want you to think that as a reader." And so what I needed to do was go back and build the foundation of that character and incorporate that backstory somehow so that when they make the action, the backstory and the feedback that they've gotten earlier in the story informs their reaction to the character's action. And so getting a stream of consciousness from a reader is invaluable because it lets you know where you're lacking in context as a writer.
Did you ever run into the situation where a reader or a beta reader, it's just somebody told you something about a character and you learned about the character from that experience? Where it wasn't like what you're describing where it's oh, you got the wrong idea, where it's like, "Oh, I did not know this, but that is true."
Beta readers absolutely can make characters better than you ever envisioned because they are informed by their own lived experience. And so they can offer a perspective that you are completely unknown to. And it is serendipitous when a reader will say something about a character and you're like, "Oh my god, that backstory is so much better than anything I could have come up with." And so their quote becomes the inspiration for that character, and you owe it to that reader for what that character's become. And that's why I have a novella. And I think we mentioned this in the first
Yeah, bring
episode.
it back,
I'll
bring it
reiterate
back.
it here just so that if you didn't catch the first one, you should go watch the first one, but you can catch it again now. Um, Hollicks's novella came from my developmental editor changing a piece of dialogue. Hollix and Aixia, two characters in Eternal Dreams, were having a shared moment, and Aixia said, "I've waited so long for this." And my developmental editor, her name is Audrey Hopper. If anyone's looking for an editor, she's phenomenal. AudreyEdits.com. She said, instead of saying, "I've waited for this for so long," what happens if Aixia says, "I've missed you"? And with that single sentence change, 3 words, you've inspired anticipation from one character to backstory between 2 characters. You have an extended relationship where they have spent time in the past that you, as the reader, know nothing about, and they're coming together, and you're seeing this reunion for the first time. So, how does that change the dynamic of everything that you've read up until this point? You think they're 2 new characters meeting each other, but you get to this point where you're like, oh, there's more here. So, you go and read again and say, how can I interpret this passage differently, knowing that these 2 people know each other? Were they excited to see each other? Did they ignore each other the entire time? Was there a tension that you didn't pick up on because you thought they didn't know each other? And so that sentence is something that I can call to and plant a flag on and say, absolutely, beta readers, developmental editors can inform and enhance storytelling and character creation
to
100%.
the point where they can generate the idea of a brand new story all on its own.
Oh my god, it was just the biggest relief in the world because writing a continued 350,000 word story over 4 years at this point, you just get tired. You've lived in these characters' lives for so long that you're like, I know what needs to happen, but I can't do it beautifully in prose. And then something new happens, and it's like a wildfire that just catches, and you get that reinvigorated passion. And I cranked out all 30 words in 27 days, 30,000 words in 27 days. So I did my plot and all that good planning for a month. Then I started on August 1st, I think, or April 1st. And the reason I had the time, I gave my novel Eternal Dreams to the editor and just started writing. I was like, I'm not going to look at it until I'm finished with the novella.
No, that's a good idea. It sounds like you just had that moment where it's like that meme where your brain just goes.
Yeah, yeah, it's I get it now. And so you have the idea and you're like, boom, straight to the races. And because you've done it before, it becomes easy. It becomes second nature. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you can get on a bike and just go. And so it becomes easier. It becomes more fun. You get to the enjoyable parts much faster because you're not walking through quicksand and sludge and swamp to get to the end. You're like on a track wearing spikes, sprinting at full speed, and you can knock it out and have a pretty high quality product compared to where you started.
We say it a lot on this show, actually. I've said it in a lot of different episodes. Like, it is very useful to learn the craft. It's very useful to watch episodes like this, read books, do all of the learning that you can, whether it's for plotting, character creation, world building, prose, anything. But the best teacher is going to be writing, getting out there and just writing your story, giving it to people, and getting that feedback. Like, that's really what you need to do. There's no point in waiting. The longer you wait, the more you're going to regret waiting once you get to it. Just get out there and write. You can do it, people.
If I had to tell myself or create a plan of attack that if I forgot everything I knew about writing and I wanted to start over and I gave myself one piece of advice, single character story that is no more than 10,000 words. Do the thing one time, start to finish, edit it, start to finish, beta read it, developmental edit, do the whole process, start to finish one time. You'll be done in 2 months instead of 2 years. It'll cost you a whole lot less. It'll cost you $300 instead of 3,000. And you can determine if you even like doing the thing after you've done it once or twice.
That's beautiful. And honestly, a perfect moment to start wrapping up this episode as we get to the end of our time. Ryan, thank you so much for coming back on again. Please tell the people where can they find you, where can they find your books, and what are you working on right now?
Absolutely. You can find my novels, Lost Souls and Eternal Dreams, at ryanskeffington.com. Signed paperback and hardcover editions. Sign up for the mailing list. Everyone will get the novella for free if you're on the mailing list when it comes out. It'll probably be early 2026. I'm on all the social medias at Ryan Skeff, Skeff. All my DMs are open, and I love nothing more than talking about writing and all this fan freaking tastic stuff. If you got a YouTube channel, let me come hang out. If you've got a blog, let's do an interview. I love spending time with people. It's my jam.
Guys, Ryan is a great guest, so get him on there, hit him up. You will be satisfied. All right, that's perfect. Again, Ryan, thank you for coming on to the show. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya.
See ya.
Another solid episode.
They
Ryan,
fly by so fast.
it doesn't feel like 45 minutes. Like, I look up at the time and I go like, oh shit, okay.